مساء الخير واهلا بكم الى حلقه جديده من واشنطن اونلاين. معي انا هدي العويس. ازمه جديده بين تركيا والسويد بعد حرق القران الكريم في العاصمة السويدية ستوكهولم. تركيا تقول أنها لن توافق على انضمام السويد إلى حلف الناتو، فما تداعيات هذه الأزمة الجديدة على العلاقات الغربية التركية؟ نبحث مواضيع هذه الحلقة مع ضيوفي، وهما سيد إلهام تانير رئيس تحرير شبكة أفال نيوز التركية، ينضم إلينا من العاصمة واشنطن، ومن واشنطن أيضا ينضم إلينا السيد بهنام بن تاليبو كبير باحثي الشأن الإيراني في معهد الدفاع عن الديمقراطية. ابقوا معنا لمتابعة هذه الحلقة. أبدأ هذه الحلقة بالترحيب بضيفي السيد إلهام تانير. أهلا وسهلا بك سيد تانير رئيس تحرير شبكة أفال نيوز التركية. إذا سيد تانير، أزمة جديدة تضاف إلى أزمات تركيا مع الغرب. الآن تركيا من جديد تمانع انضمام السويد إلى حلف الناتو بعد حرق القرآن الكريم في ستوكهولم. ولكن طبعا التصعيد التركي اليوم يأخذ عدة اتجاهات: تصعيد ضد اليونان، تصعيد ضد قبرص، وأيضا تهديد بعمل عسكري جديد في شمال شرق سوريا. هل تساعد مثل هذه الاستعراضات السياسية، إذا سميناها الرئيس أردوغان، في صناديق الاقتراع؟ هل تنعكس إيجابا على حظوظه في انتخابات مايو المقبل؟
Yes, some of those issues, geopolitical issues, also coupled with the new economic policies of Erdogan in recent months to shore up his, supporters, but his, especially again, the recent increase in the salaries of the public servants, or the minimum wage, and some other policies, all got together to make Erdogan once more re-elected. And whether this is working or not, it is too early to say. Countries like Turkey, we have, if the elections will be held in May, that means we still have 4 months. And the regular time is June. So 4 to 5 months. It's a long time, but definitely there is a saying in Turkish that he touches all the buttons, whether it is geopolitics, whether economic, and I think we will see more issues in coming weeks and months. And he perhaps will decide whether, some suggest that Erdogan is going to annex the northern Cyprus. Some suggest that Turkey will attack, Greece or the islands on Aegean. Others say the northern Syria. We will see which one, but Erdogan used tension with the Europe in 2017 before the referendum. And so Erdogan uses these issues whenever he sees fit, and it is still too early which one of those issues will be the top in the agenda before this very important watershed moment of Turkish Republic, which will be the next election in a few months.
نعم، حضرتك تتحدث عن خطوات فيها فتح جبهات عسكرية، ضم أجزاء من قبرص، أو استهداف الجزر اليونانية، أو حتى استهداف مناطق من شمال شرق سوريا. أي من هذه التحركات ممكن تحقيقها على أرض الواقع في ظل الممانعة الأمريكية، الروسية، الأوروبية لمثل هذه التصرفات التركية؟
Well, look, Erdogan is in very big dilemma. If he uses another military intervention in northern Syria, I think it is the most doable. But Erdogan also wants to, shake hands with Assad, right? And he wants to get along with Assad. And before the elections, meeting with Assad in some type of setting, shaking hands, is going to give hope or signal that Turkey, whether Turkey will be able to do it, but it will give the image that Erdogan will send the Syrian refugees 4 million or 5 million refugees. This is one of the biggest agenda items in Turkey. But if Erdogan decides to do another military operation in northern Syria, perhaps around the Kobane, I don't think the Damascus is going to be happy, or the Russia is going to be happy about it. So that is why I think Erdogan at the same time talking these different issues. Is this Greece? Is this Cyprus? Is this North Syria? Is this going to be northern Iraq? Is this going to be some kind of fight with some of the European countries? Sweden, for now, since this person who burned Quran in Sweden, suddenly gave another excuse for Erdogan to go after Sweden again. Perhaps like 2017, before the referendum, Erdogan is going to continue go after these countries, as well as some of the European countries, about Islamophobia, which Erdogan always uses. And he is going to choose to, side with Putin. So all I am saying is, it's really difficult at this point to think that which of the option Erdogan is going to go. But one thing I believe, Erdogan has to, this start to this nationalistic drum, so that either nationalist or Islamist emotions, by his stirring these emotions, he is going to able to bring his supporters or the conservative segment of the country, because he needs something.
هناك تسليط كبير للضوء هذه الأيام من الصحافة الأمريكية والصحافة الغربية على السياسات الخارجية التركية، توصف بأنها سياسات متهورة، سياسات غير عقلانية. هناك أصلا توتر في العلاقات الأمريكية التركية تحديدا. هناك أصوات كثيرة في واشنطن داعية لمعاقبة تركيا، داعية لتغيير السياسات الأمريكية تجاه تركيا. كيف ستؤثر اليوم خطوة امتناع الرئيس التركي أردوغان عن الموافقة على ضم السويد إلى حلف الناتو على العلاقات الغربية التركية؟
I mean, U.S.-Turkey relations have been already going down the hill for a number of years, and during the last 2 years of Trump administration, things looked a little better. But nevertheless, none of the real issues got resolved. On the contrary, Trump administration was the administration kick out Turkey out of the F-35, fifth generation jet alliance. And also Trump administration was the one who imposed on CAATSA sanctions on Turkey because of the, S-400 purchase. And we all know that Erdogan did not, start on good terms with Biden administration, but because of the Afghanistan in 2021, Biden and Erdogan got closer. And now, after more than 2 years, for the first time, Erdogan has not been invited to Washington, D.C. since he became prime minister or president for the last 20 years. Whenever there is a new U.S. president, Erdogan always comes here within the first year, but now it is the third year and he is still not invited. But at the same time, yes, Biden administration wants to sell this F-16 recently, and informally again notified the Congress. There are some serious opposition voices at the Congress, starting with obviously Bob Menendez, who chairs the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. But there are a number of other congressional leaders also have been opposing. So we don't know whether Biden administration is going to really push this and risk to get in fight with the Congress. We will see that. But one of the conditions, we have not heard this formally or officially, but the understanding is, the US sells F-16s and Erdogan supports the Sweden and Finland's memberships. But even this, first of all, we still have some serious issues at the Congress. We don't know whether they're going to resolve. But the second, I don't know if Erdogan wants to approve Sweden and Finland's membership before the elections. For the election period, now for the next 4 months, Erdogan will use every opportunity to, stir up the emotions within his base, because economy is not doing well, people are not happy, and Turkey has been one of the worst countries in the rule of law index in the world. So as a quality in the standards of the living in Turkey have been decreasing, as well as the economy, as well as the opportunities for the people of Turkey, whether it is the minorities, whether any segment of the country, youngs want to leave Turkey and immigrate to Western countries and all that. So overall, things are not going well. And Erdogan, I think, will use every opportunity, such as Sweden membership, and to get in fight with some of these countries to use, just like he has been doing this for a number of years. I think he will try. So I don't think we will see anything resolving before the elections, or I would be surprised.
نعم، شكرا جزيلا لك ضيف السيد إلهام تنير رئيس تحرير شبكة أفال نيوز، كنت معنا من واشنطن.
Thank you.
وأنتقل معكم الآن متابعينا إلى الضيف الثاني في هذه الحلقة، وهو السيد بهنام بن طاليبو، كبير باحثي الشأن الإيراني في معهد الدفاع عن الديمقراطية. أهلا وسهلا بك سيد بهنام. سيد بهنام، لماذا قررت إيران اليوم وقف صادراتها من النفط الرخيص لسوريا، وأيضا بدأت تطالب دمشق بدفعات فورية على الطاقة المقدمة من إيران لسوريا؟ هل الموضوع مرتبط بالوضع الاقتصادي داخل إيران، العقوبات المطبقة على إيران، أم أنه تحرك سياسي لمعاقبة دمشق على خطوات التطبيع بين أنقرة والحكومة السورية؟
It's a great question. If one is going to be looking at Iranian resources going to Syria over time, there may or may not be different political, strategic, ideological, or even economic reasons for changes in the patterns of the Islamic Republic's support to the brutal regime in Damascus, that of Bashar al-Assad. So in this instance, given the long-standing trend of economic support, political support, military support, and even the human lives that Iran has sacrificed. It's thrown Iranian military officers, Shiite militiamen from around the region into the area in defense of the Assad regime. So to look at a change in economic support, particularly when it comes to petroleum, and looking at that as a potential punishment, or looking at that as a potential rupture in ties, I think would not necessarily tell you the fullest story. I think what will tell you the full story is taking a larger view of the sustained support the regime has given in the past decade to Assad. And ultimately, only then can you know if this is just a brief dip in the relationship, or if something changing. So we don't have enough information yet to say what motivates it and if this is a change. But if past this prologue, if you look at the long-standing trend, the more than a decade of lethal support that the regime has given the Assad regime in Damascus, this may be something of a blip, but that's just my assessment, looking at it as a picture rather than a video. I think we need to take a broader contextual look at this as if it is a video.
هل الأوضاع الاقتصادية داخل إيران اليوم تسمح لإيران الاستمرار بتمويل حملاتها الخارجية، بتمويل مشاريعها الخارجية، وتحديدا داخل سوريا؟
Most unfortunately, if you look at the financial figures from the tail end of 2022, the regime continues to generate revenue, illicit revenue, particularly from oil, going to East Asia, to places like China, for instance. So if we do have a problem with the regime's foreign and security policy, if we do have a problem with the 4 decades of the export of the revolution in the heartland of the Middle East and globally, we need to look at who has been funding it. And the main funding mechanism is those who continue to buy Iranian oil, particularly Iranian oil when it is illicit and when it is subject to U.S. and or international sanctions. The problem right now, as you know, is while the U.S. retained its oil sanctions on the books, active enforcement of those sanctions has not been as strong as many would have liked. So therefore, the fact that the regime is able to continue other elements of its adventurous foreign policy in the region, which don't just relate to, material support vis-a-vis economic support, such as petroleum to its partners, like the Assad regime, but ultimately the trafficking of men, the trafficking of money, the trafficking of munitions across the heartland of the Middle East. So the regime, unfortunately, continues to generate the funds to support this kind of policy.
تقارير تحدثت عنها الصحافة الأمريكية الأسبوع الماضي تقول أن إيران حركت مضادات طيران إيرانية إلى داخل الأراضي السورية، وطبعا هذه الخطوة أتت بعد خروج بعض مقاتلي ميليشيا واغنر التابعة لروسيا، وأيضا بعد سحب روسيا لإس 300 من الأراضي السورية وتحويلها للاستفادة منها في الحرب في أوكرانيا. هل تزيد الحرب في أوكرانيا من النفوذ الإيراني على الأراضي السورية؟ وهل هذا أمر يزعج واشنطن؟ هل هذا أمر يدفع واشنطن للتغيير من سياساتها في الملف السوري؟
Well, the problem, as you know better than I, is that the Biden administration has had a Middle East policy, particularly towards the heartland of the region, towards Iraq and Syria, that is actually missing. We just had a high-level visit to Iraq by a high-level U.S. official just recently, and just recently we had strikes again on a U.S. base, or I believe on a U.S. base in Syria by drones likely launched either by Iran-backed Shia militias inside of Syria or Iran-backed Shia militias inside of Iraq. We don't know the point of origin just yet. So this tells you one thing: despite the U.S. public level interest in trying to be seen as still engaging with the changing facts on the ground in the region, nothing in terms of the Iranian regional security strategy has actually changed. They continue to try to look to find ways to make Baghdad more reliant on Tehran. They continue to try to find ways to make its influence greater, not lesser, in places like Syria. And they continue to use both of these countries as bases to launch more attacks against the US and against the coalition forces through the Shia militia network. And while, yes, ultimately Iran and Russia did bail out lethally the Assad regime in Syria, there were some slight tactical differences vis-a-vis the Russians and the Iranians as to how they did business and whom they interacted with inside Syria. But with the changing force posture vis-a-vis Wagner leaving parts of Syria, vis-a-vis greater Russian military involvement with the war in Ukraine, I'm sure the Islamic Republic is looking to capitalize on some of those vacuums left inside Syria and to continue its regional policy of making more Arab states dependent on Tehran.
سيد بهنام، كيف تصف الخلافات أو التوافقات بين تركيا وإيران تجاه الملف السوري؟ مثل ما تعرف تركيا ترغب بالتقليل من نفوذ الولايات المتحدة والتقليل من دعم أمريكا للإدارة الذاتية وقوات سوريا الديمقراطية. هل تشترك معها إيران بنفس هذا الهدف؟
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because the Iran-Turkey relationship cannot be defined merely as competition or collaboration. I think almost a decade ago now, me and a colleague wrote an essay calling this a relationship of frenemies, friends in some places, enemies in another. And unlike a lot of other strategic competition, this is, almost half a millennia old. This is almost 500 years old, and it's been inherited and changed across different regimes. Sometimes they're friendlier, sometimes they're unfriendlier, really over this past 500 years. But in the very recent era, particularly with the Islamic Republic and the Republic of Turkey, and with the Islamic Republic and the AKP-led government of Erdogan in Turkey, it's been a lot more permissive at the strategic level. And at the tactical level, there have been quite a few differences. We know that, for instance, Turkey has actually shot at some of the Iran-backed Shia militias, such as Hezbollah, for instance, inside of Syria in the past. And the greater the threat of a Turkish military incursion into northern Syria, particularly vis-a-vis the Kurds, the greater the potential for more military tension between Iran-backed networks and Turkey there. So I think with the recent kind of U-turn or pivot that we've seen in Erdogan's policy towards Turkey, really disbanding a lot of his anti-Assad rhetoric from 2012 to 2015. The government in Tehran and the foreign ministry has said explicitly this. They welcome the diplomatic changes, and that's precisely because Iran hopes those diplomatic changes would provide it with more military room for maneuver inside Syria and thus limit the threat of more Turkish military incursions into northern Syria. And again, just like with the Russians leaving and offering a vacuum, would offer Iran-backed militias more space for maneuver, more space for political influence, more space to launch attacks against coalition forces, and more space, of course, to continue the export of the revolution, the strategy of creating a land bridge from Iran to the Eastern Mediterranean, and ultimately of making more Arab capitals reliant on Tehran. Let's not forget, as important as it is, that Turkey has in the past shot at some of these Iran-backed militias in Syria. At the same time, different Turkish firms, some with political connections actually, have been at the height of sanctions busting in the past, allowing Iran the capability to access the international financial system to generate more of those illicit revenues. Those are the revenues that we talked about that make this regional terrorism strategy possible.
وأخيرا سيد بهنام، هل من الممكن أن تنتهي الحرب السورية التي بدأت أو قامت على أساس صراع أهلي بين محور محسوب على إيران ومحور محسوب على تركيا؟ هل تنتهي بتوافق بين تركيا وإيران؟ هل هذا أمر ممكن؟
It's a very good point. What has motivated Turkish military incursions into Syria has changed, but one constant thing running throughout those different incursions and its relationship with Damascus is, as you know, the Kurdish issue and the issue of connecting the Kurdish-controlled cantons across northern Syria, not making them contiguous or not making them both powerful and contiguous. So while, yes, Turkey would have a problem with the increased militia presence on its border, the footsie, or the kind of the half permissiveness, the half contestedness that Ankara and Tehran have kind of played with each other over time may offer Erdogan more space to either collaborate or turn a blind eye, or to kind of segment off that threat and deal with other elements of the Iran network at a time of his own choosing. But one thing is quite clear: the Islamic Republic is the major beneficiary of this change in Turkish strategy vis-a-vis Syria.
نعم، شكرا جزيلا لك ضيفي السيد بهنام بن طليبو، كنت معنا من واشنطن.
Thank you, always a pleasure.
وختاما شكرا لكل من تابع واشنطن أونلاين. ألقاكم في حلقة جديدة الأسبوع المقبل، إلى اللقاء.